A brutal and sweltering heat wave is impacting large swaths of the country this weekend. Temperatures are expected to break records today in states across the Northeast and the middle of the country as cities brace for heat indices of 100 degrees or more. CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassman is in Tampa Bay with this report.
There's this southern expression, even Satan's sweating today.
It's too hot. It's too hot right now.
This is hot. This is brutal. Brutal.
Better get used to brutal. Today's blowtorch forecast, lots of triple-digit highs. Heat alerts again for more than 80 million Americans. For many of them, that heat is considered dangerous. Places like Texas, where this heat wave feels like a siege of standing right next to one of the wildfires burning near Fort Worth, or California near Yosemite. More than 6 communities in 20 states this past week hit record highs. Take Tampa Bay, hit for most of the last week by hot, humid winds off the Gulf of Mexico. The daily high for the feels-like temperature between 102 and 107. Texas and California had highs of 115. Overheated people in Dallas hunted for air conditioning anywhere. Libraries seemed cool again. Geoscientists blamed inaction on climate change and warned hothouse summers are here to stay.
These are spectacularly tough things, and they're only going to get worse unless we tackle the problem with everything we've got.
Europe's week of heat was historic and deadly. Thousands died, most of them elderly. Wildfires in Spain. In the UK, where central air is rare, temperatures reached 36 degrees above normal. Portugal's high, 117. On both sides of the Atlantic, people have shared triple-digit misery, and talking about the weather has meant more than making small talk.
They should take it seriously because heat-related illnesses can be life-threatening.
That was Mark Strassman reporting. We turn now to Miami Mayor Francis Suarez. He is a Republican and the current chairman of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. He joins us from Miami. Mr. Mayor, good to have you with us. You just heard our reporting there. You know, in this 2,000-page report the UN put out earlier in the year, it refers to Florida as an example of a place where the impacts of climate change are already being felt. And it mentions people are likely going to have to move away if they live on the coastline. You and your city have had to come up with a strategy, and the one released would spend $3.8 billion over the next few decades to build seawalls, take other measures. That's quadruple your annual operating budget. Can you afford what's coming?
Well, first of all, Margaret, it's not theoretical for us in the city of Miami. It's real. We deal with it day in and day out, year after year. We've been dedicating a tremendous amount of resources, updating our building codes over decades, since 1992 when we had a 200-mile-per-hour hurricane event called Hurricane Andrew. Now our latest challenge, of course, is the water and the heat, as you've said in the prior segment. And our citizens approved right after Hurricane Irma in 2017, which created a 4 to 6 foot storm surge in our central business district, a plan called Miami Forever. And the basis of the plan is to spend hundreds of millions of dollars that were voter approved. It was actually a voter approved tax, and combine them with other funding sources like the state and federal government to be able to upgrade our infrastructure to deal with all the things that are being thrown our way from Mother Nature.
But when you said you can't afford not to take it seriously, I wonder if you think the National Republican Party takes the problem of climate change seriously.
Well, what we're seeing at the national level is that the only action that is occurring is action that's taken in a bipartisan basis. The Democrats, unfortunately, have failed to be able to pass bills to address climate at any sort of scale. So the infrastructure bill,
they don't have any Republican votes. They also don't have all Democrats on board, but it would help if they had Republican votes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but I think what it means is that it has to be bipartisan in terms of their outreach, in terms of their messaging, in terms of, which is how they passed the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill with Republican votes. And we still haven't seen any funding from that bill, by the way. Like I said, we've dedicated $200 million in funding from our city residents. It's a great question. You know, they have a great infrastructure czar, which is a former mayor of New Orleans, who was the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, who we work with, but we still have not seen a penny of that money trickle down, percolate down to the cities, and we need it because, as I've said, we've dedicated a couple of $100 million. Yeah. We've gotten about 30 or 40 million from the state, but we need significantly more than that, as you've indicated in your initial comments.
So there was this $2 trillion American Rescue Plan that passed back in the spring with 0 Republican votes. Florida did benefit. Republican Governor DeSantis allocated over $400 million to help coastal communities in Florida. So have you gotten that money in your hand? And how much more do you need exactly?
Yes, we have. Actually, the American Rescue Plan, ARPA, as you describe it, it's coming in 2 tranches, $950 billion last year, $950 billion this year. And we have allocated it effectively. And we are trying to leverage the money that we have to do things like, increasing our seawalls, valves, tidal valves that prevent the backflow of water into our city during storm events, pump stations, which we have built more and more and are planning to build significantly more. So we are addressing the issue head on, and certainly the funding that we're going to be receiving from the state and from the federal government, hopefully eventually from the infrastructure bill, is critically needed for us to be able to tackle this problem and make sure that we have Miami forever.
So we mentioned you are a registered Republican, mayor of the 2nd largest city in Florida. When you were on this program back in January, you told me that you had repeatedly reached out to your governor, fellow Republican, to talk to him about health precautions you wanted to take in Miami, but you had no contact, no outreach. And I wonder what you think that says about Ron DeSantis's executive leadership in a time of crisis.
You know, we're different. We have different perspectives and different personalities and different philosophies in terms of our leadership style. I lead like you said, the largest, arguably the largest urban city in the state. And his mandate is significantly greater in terms of number, but it's also very different in terms of cities and rural areas. So
does he talk to you now? Does he talk to the mayor of the 2nd largest city in the state?
We do. We have spoken on a variety of occasions. In fact, one of the ones that we spoke about recently happened to be about resiliency. The state did give us about $40 million that we combined with the $200 million, and we did a press conference together in Broward County. So on the environment, I have to say his record over the last 4 years, including the legislature's record, has been very much pro-environment, and it's something that he and I share.
What about on issues of health? I mean, when it comes to COVID, Florida's response has been heavily scrutinized. Monkeypox, right now, Florida has the 3rd highest case count of any state in the country. Are you in Miami getting the vaccines you need? Are you getting the testing you need? Has that part of the health rollout, working with the state, been smooth?
You know, we're monitoring this outbreak, as you mentioned. I am not aware of any shortages in vaccines or testing at this particular juncture. None of it has been, come to my attention. But certainly we'll work with the state and certainly we'll work with the federal government to make sure that our city is protected and that those here get the necessary testing and vaccination to protect themselves against the monkeypox virus. All
right. Mayor Suarez, thank you for your time today. And we'll be right back. Today marks 5 months since Russia launched a full-scale war on Ukraine. The invasion has cost tens of thousands of lives, and it has roiled the global economy. For a look at where the fight stands now, we are joined by Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. Madam Ambassador, it's good to have you back on the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
I want to ask you about what just happened in the past 24 to 48 hours. There's an estimated 20 million metric tons of grain stuck in Ukraine, can't get out. This is contributing to food inflation and food shortages around the world. So less than 24 hours after signing this UN broker deal to allow Ukraine's grain to export, Russia sent missiles into the Odessa port city where that grain would be transiting. This is what the State Department says. Your government said it's like spit in the face of the UN and Turkey. But you're sticking with the deal? Why?
Well, what happened in the port is so Russian, and it's very telling about what has been happening for the past 8 years. For the past 8 years, Ukraine always acted in good faith and tried everything possible and sometimes impossible to end the war and to return our sovereignty. Similar with this 151 days. We are defending, we are standing strong in defending our country, and at the same time, we will find any options in order to resolve the crises like this food crisis that Russia has created for other countries, not only for Ukraine. So we will do everything in order to perform and fulfill our part of the deal. Now, when Russia is violating it, they're clearly showing who they are and that they need to be stopped.
So is Russia technically violating it? Because unnamed UN officials are quoted as saying they may not have, because Russia never pledged to avoid attacking the parts of the Ukrainian ports that are not directly used for grain exports. Really? It seems like a pretty big oversight.
Well, let's call it what it is. Everything Russia is doing in Ukraine is a violation of pretty much every international law. Attacking a sovereign country is a violation. It's a war crime. So we have the deal with UN and with our colleagues from Turkey. We are fulfilling that deal. They agreed also with Russia, and they have to first stop the war, and they have to do everything without even any initiative signed. But with this, I think they're just showing their true face again. So the good response to that should be more weapons to Ukraine so that we can defend ourselves, we can get them out from our country, and we can unblock our ports and unblock all Ukraine in order not only to ship the grain, but the sunflower and everything else that has been stuck in Ukraine.
Right, that impacts your baby formula, that impacts foodstuffs for everything. But does this attack make that food crisis worse? Will this hurt your ability to export what little is getting out?
We will do everything possible, and we're exporting even now through the western border, of course, the capacity, through land, through railroads, through all possible ways. And we will continue doing so. Our farmers are even planting and harvesting under the fire. So we will, as we defend the country, we will continue also to rebuild at the same time and plant and do everything possible to feed us and feed the world. Hopefully, and we see already good results of the new HIMARSes and artillery being provided to us, that will allow us to go on the counter-offensive and free our territory, which we need to do not only for grain, but also to save our people.
So your First Lady was here in Washington and addressed Congress and specifically asked for air defense systems. We know the U.S. has pledged to send national advanced surface-to-air missile systems, but they haven't actually arrived in Ukraine yet. Is that what she was referring to, and what specifically are you asking for?
Yes, very effective visit of the First Lady, and her message that while Russia kills, America saves, I think have been heard by everyone here. And yes, we're talking about the NASAMS and other air defense systems. We're also talking about more firepower, more artillery, more HIMARSes, which just last Friday we heard the announcement of more coming.
These are precision-guided rockets.
Exactly. And we already see that with that equipment that is very effectively used by our defenders, we're able to destroy the ammo dumps that Russia is creating on the uncontrolled territories, and that we actually are moving into freeing more territories in the south, and hopefully with a sufficient number of weapons, we can do the same in the east. But the situation remains very, very difficult still.
It is, and we know now, U.S. intelligence says Russia controls about 20% of Ukraine. I want to make sure that I bring this up with you because it was so deeply disturbing when I heard it. A State Department official, Ambassador Toria Nuland, said, Russia makes orphans and then it steals orphans. She said up to 1,000 Ukrainian children have been stolen and given to Russian families. What exactly is happening? What can the U.S. government or the American people do about it?
It has been one of the key pleas of the First Lady here. On all uncontrolled territories from Mariupol to other places, Russia is forcefully deporting not only adults and families, but specifically children. And Russians themselves already admitted that 350,000 children have been evacuated, as they say, but kidnapped, let's call it the way what it is, to Russia. They have relaxed their own legislation in order to allow them to be adopted quickly into Russian families. This is a brutal violation not only of international law, but of a common decency. How can you steal our children and try to hide them somewhere in Russia. Only 47 children we were able to return to Ukraine right now, and as of August 1st, Ukraine will be starting a platform, Children at War, which will allow people throughout the globe, including Russia, to add information there about all the children. It's our first priority to locate, find them, and return them. And it's very difficult because we don't have control over these territories.
And do you have any hope that you can actually return these children without the United States or other countries getting involved?
We need everyone who can to get involved. And I can assure you that everyone in Ukraine will not rest until all of them are located and returned.
Ambassador, thank you very much for your time. We'll be back in a moment. We now want to turn to Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So you have been making this big push for this CHIPS bill that would direct about $50 billion towards the semiconductor industry. Those are those computer chips and phones and dishwashers,
and
weapons, and basically everything. Yeah. The bill now also has about $200 billion in additional spending, which I understand you would play a role in helping to dole out in some way. For people at home, why should U.S. taxpayers subsidize a profitable industry?
Right now, we are dangerously dependent on other countries, mostly in Asia, for our supply of semiconductors. We don't make any leading-edge semiconductors in the United States. And those are the sophisticated chips that you need for military equipment and high-end computing. We buy almost all of them from Taiwan. So the reality is we need companies to expand in America, and other countries all around the world are providing incentives.
But doesn't rolling out state subsidies of private industry create a dangerous precedent? Or are you arguing we're just in a scenario where we need to start thinking of vital industries as partially state-funded or subsidized?
Yeah. What I'm saying is this is a matter of national security, and I don't think we can put a price tag on it because we are in a very vulnerable spot. So if you talk to the military experts or the national defense contractors, you know, they'll tell you they need chips. There's 250 chips in a Javelin launching system, and that's not as sophisticated as some of the new equipment.
There's a long list of things Congress needs to get done in a very short period of time. Are you confident that the votes are actually there to get this passed?
Yes, I am.
16 Republicans voted to move along with this, but this is still not done, and it's being tweaked here. So I want to ask you about some of the things that have been proposed. You have skeptics on both the right and the left for this, right? Bernie Sanders has said he doesn't like it. It's a blank check to profitable companies. Rick Scott of Florida, Republican, has compared it to corporate welfare. A former labor secretary from the Clinton administration called it pure extortion. That doesn't sound like this is truly bipartisan, as you called it. This sounds like this is fairly controversial.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's clearly bipartisan. You don't get 64 votes in the Senate every day, right?
But on this final bill, you think, despite these detractors,
this will be
a
big bipartisan vote in the House and the Senate. Yes, I believe so. Now, also, I fully dispute Senator Sanders' characterization of this. It isn't a blank check. There are many strings attached. Strings attached, companies can't use this money to build facilities in other countries. Companies who accept this money can't then turn around and be building facilities in China for leading edge technology. There's a lot of strings attached around you know, the quality of jobs that have to be created, working with small contractors and minority-owned contractors. There are labor protections. So to say it's a blank check is just dead wrong.
Are those sufficient, though? Because you have Marco Rubio of Florida coming out and arguing high-tech chip production should be further sort of restricted here on the national security portion. He says that corporations that receive the funding cannot expand chip production in China, but there are some things grandfathered in that are loopholes here. I mean, are there other places you need to tighten up stricter export restrictions, for example?
Yeah. We always have to be looking at our export controls. So I would say I feel very comfortable about this bill. It protects national security and protects taxpayers. As written, there are There are taxpayer protections. It'll be a competitive, transparent process, and there's clawback provisions. If we give the money to companies and they do what they're not supposed to, we're going to take the money back. I feel very confident around the taxpayer protections and the China guardrails.
For other industries as well?
Absolutely. For all technology, we have to do everything we can to make sure that our leading edge technology, whether it's in chips or artificial intelligence or other areas, can't get into the hands of the Chinese.
So you're open to further export restrictions?
Yes.
On Taiwan, because, you know, embedded in this is the assumption that Taiwan is at risk, potentially of annexation by China. How confident are you when you get briefed by U.S. intelligence that this is an immediate threat?
I feel confident in saying it's not immediate, and I feel also confident in saying that there's no crystal ball, but we need to be prepared. That's our job, to protect the American people.
Has inflation peaked?
I think probably. But look, if I had said that a year ago, you know, assuming another war doesn't break out, assuming we don't have another COVID, you know, there's so much out of our control. Inflation is a global problem.
I want to ask you as well about climate. NOAA is under your purview. The climate agenda for the administration is completely stalled. Is the fact that you've been unable to unstick that climate agenda, but you've moved this far with chips, does it signal to you that you need to make private industry a partner in this?
I would say yes, but much of business is on board. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. Climate-related events are more frequent, more dangerous, and more expensive than they've ever been. So do we need to do more to get business on board? Maybe. And it's, you know, something we are always wondering, how do we get things done in this divided political environment? But make no mistake about it, the climate investments that the president proposed are good for the economy and good for business. And business knows that.
Madam Secretary, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us today. We will be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. Tune in next Sunday for our first CBS News Battleground Tracker poll on the upcoming midterm elections. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.